depending on
Okay.
what. But sure. Okay. So today we are on chapter 21 of the Rambam, day 129, I believe. Okay, this is a change of, we finally finished all the laws of carrying 2 days ago. Yesterday, the laws of you can't have a Gentile work for you, or a Gentile, you can't have any of your property working on Shabbos. You can't have an animal working on Shabbos. You can't have a slave working on Shabbos. A robot, possibly. Okay, it says in the Torah, Tishbais. Tishbais means to rest. You have to rest on Shabbos. Even things which are not work, you have to rest from them. And what are these? The rabbi says these are called shvus. The rabbis made an extra extent of resting on Shabbos. Now, okay, there's certain things. Like I'll give you an example. Well, we'll give examples soon. For example, there are things which are similar to work, that look like work, and there are things that the rabbi said maybe you'll end up doing work. And these are them. Okay, now there's certain things. This is tricky. What we're talking about here is things which are not malachas. I'll give you an example. If you use your cell phone on Shabbos, a cell phone on Shabbos, potentially could be a malacha, right? It's you're working with electronics. So cell phone and driving potentially could be a malacha. Could be actually liable. Could be liable for. I don't know exactly how it works. It's debate how these things, electric things, work. If you flick a light bulb switch on, you're starting a fire. That's liable. So that's not called shvus. That's not resting on Shabbos. Turning on an electric thing, that's not resting on Shabbos. That is an actual work which could be liable. Okay, now we're talking about things which are not a malacha, but the rabbis nevertheless said you can't do them. So, and we're going to give examples. So this is something that when people are keeping Shabbos, starting to keep Shabbos, they have a lot of hardship with, because understanding the nature of what is a malacha will be liable. So a malacha is much worse. And what is not a malacha? It's a gezerah. It's the decree of the rabbis to keep you free on Shabbos. Anyone who, if we said if you dig or anything like that, or you fill in holes, you're liable because of plowing. And therefore, you can't move things to an empty field, because maybe you will come to that field and you say, oh, there's a little hole in the field there, let me fill it up. If you move a package, a storage thing on Shabbos, because you need it for a mitzvah, for example, let's say you need to move something out of the house to make space, or move something in the house, or to study Torah, in order to, you shouldn't move all the storage. Maybe you'll come to fill in holes. Let's say you walked in dirt, you have mud on your shoes, you can wipe it on a wall, but you shouldn't wipe it on the ground, because maybe you'll come to make holes in the ground. So again, these are not liable. So it's very tricky, because sometimes we might do something really fun. We might flick on a light switch. We might flick on a light switch on Shabbos, and we don't realize that light switch is starting a fire, right? Or we might pick up the phone.
Are you allowed to wipe your feet on the floor?
No.
What?
You cannot.
What if you do?
You cannot spit on the. This is not talking about. 1 second. Please don't interrupt. Mental questions after. Now this is a gezerah. Again, what we're saying now is, so for us, practically speaking, it's tricky, because if we flick on a light switch, or we answer the phone, or we turn on our computer, we don't realize that that's essentially starting a fire in the olden days, which was chopping wood and lighting and everything like that. These here are not liable. These things here we're talking about are things which are gezerah. They're a decree. They are pater aval aser. So they're forbidden to do, but you're not liable. You're going against the rabbis. Now, realize the word is karka, not ground. Mendel, you have to ask questions after, because this is Hilchos Shabbos. Realize that these are pater aval aser, and we're not going to do all the laws here. They're very, very long today. This is one of the longest chapters. Now, if you spit on the ground, you can't wipe it with your foot. Now, indoors you could, on a ritzpah you could. We're talking about a karka. But if you spit on a field or a grass field and you do that, you can't do that, because maybe you'll come to flatten out the ground. But you can walk on it. You can just walk on it. You can't wipe it into the ground. Okay. Women who are playing with nuts, things like this, they can't play with them on Shabbos, because the way they would play with nuts is roll them on the ground. They will come.
It says marbles.
Marbles or nuts.
Not using nuts as marbles.
Correct. Well, so they're playing. It's a game. Different games they play that they roll them on the ground. See who gets nearest to the main one. You can't play that. Maybe you'll come to flatten the ground. You cannot sweep.
But what if you're doing it
You can't sweep the questions after. You cannot sweep the ground. We're talking about karka. Karka means a field, because maybe if you sweep it, so in the olden days everyone had dirt floors. So if you can't sweep it on Shabbos, because maybe you will come to now using a vacuum, you for sure can't use, because a vacuum is starting a fire, right? Electricity. We're talking about sweeping. You can't sweep on a karka, which is a field ground, unless it has tiles on it. You could pour water on it, and we're not worried. Maybe you'll make the hole. Maybe you'll fill up the holes, because you're not planning on doing this. You can't rub the ground, even if it has stones. You can't blow on it, and you can't scrub it, even on the holidays. How much more so on Shabbos? You shouldn't do it on the way of the weekdays, and you'll come to make the ground flat. A field which got number 4 got messed up during the rainy days, you can bring hay, straw, and put it on it. And when you're doing it, you shouldn't do it with a basket or box, rather with the corners, in order that you shouldn't do it the way you do in the weekdays, and you'll come to make so an example of this is, let's say you have sometimes you don't have it here as much on the East Coast. You have certain places where there's like a huge puddle, and someone will throw out like a cardboard box on the sidewalk or whatever, so people can walk on it. So that's a similar thing. Okay, if you're planting, you're watering plants, you are chayiv, you are liable kazareya, and therefore you cannot draw water from a well which is in a place that maybe you'll come to want water plants, and because of this,
Pulley.
If the well that you're pulling water from is in a courtyard, you could. So you can draw water, right? You can draw water in, now there's a faucets, but you can draw, but this might make a difference. Can you take from water from your hose outside, right? So if it's in your courtyard, then it's okay, but if it's right next to all your plants that you water, that might be a problem on Shabbos. If you harvest on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do that. You pull out a plant. Therefore, you cannot, if you have a beehive, you cannot take honey out. You're not allowed to harvest on Shabbos.
What? So why is it Shabbat?
Questions after. So therefore, because if you harvest, you're liable. Therefore, you cannot take honey from a beehive on Shabbos, because that is like harvesting. You'll get confused with harvesting. Similarly, you cannot go and climb in a tree. It doesn't matter if the tree is alive or dead. And if you're and you can't hang something in a tree, and you can't lean something on a tree, and you can't go and be there the whole Shabbos, and you cannot deal with any vegetation which is still growing, because maybe you'll come to pull off. Fruit which fell on Shabbos, you can't eat them until Saturday night, because maybe you'll say, hey, that was a good apple that fell, let me pick another apple. Let's say you have a myrtle branch, but this is really a vegetation which you can smell from. You can smell it out. We're not worried you're going to pick it. But if it's a fruit that you want to smell, you cannot smell it on Shabbos, because maybe you'll come to pick it. A tree which has very, very high roots, 3 tfachim, they're 3 handbreadths, so you want to sit on them. You can't sit on them, and if they're not high 3, then they're like the ground. If they come from higher than 3 into 3, then you can use them. If they're higher than 3, even though one side is equal to the ground, you cannot sit on them. You cannot ride an animal on Shabbos. Maybe you'll come to cut off a branch to lead it. And you cannot put something on an animal, and you cannot go on and sit there the whole Shabbos, and you cannot lean on an animal, and something that's leaning on an animal, you can lean on that thing. If you went on a tree on Shabbos by accident, you're allowed to go down. If you went on purpose, you're forbidden to go down. With an animal, even on purpose, you're allowed to go off, because we don't want to pain the animal, right? So if you go on you say, I don't care about Shabbos, you go on the animal, you're allowed to come off. Similarly, you could take off something an animal, because the pain of the animal. Tzar ba'alei chayim. For example, if the animal is carrying something, a basket of fruit, you can take your hand and take it off and put it in another place, or lean it and it'll fall by itself. If it's coming on its way on Erev Shabbos, and the animal's caught, when you reach the outside field, you take them, you take out the vessels which you can take on Shabbos, and the ones you can't, you untie them and let them fall. If they're things that are going to break, if they're small, you can bring pillows and put them on them and let them fall on it. Because so we're talking about vessels you're not allowed to take out on Shabbos. They're muktzah. We'll talk about that later. Because if you want, um, um, because if you want to take the pillow, one second. What does it say?
Let's see.
So you could take pillows and let them fall, because if you want to move the pillows, you can move them, so you can't touch necessarily the vessels that came in on Shabbos, but you can move the pillows, which are already in the permitted area. If you have glass flasks, you can untie them, let them fall, even though they'll break. It's okay because you can fix them. And the rabbi, so usually on Shabbos, we never make calculations with money. So if your house is going to burn down, let it burn. It's a $5 million house, let it burn, right? However, when it comes to Shavuos, the rabbis making decrees of things which are forbidden, which you could technically do. If it's a lot of money, they will make a difference. But if it's a little bit of money, they'll say, let the glass break, you can fix it. Keep in mind, the glass back then didn't crack like nowadays.
Well, it does say if
What
the
do you
sack,
mean it didn't crack like nowadays? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Like it cracked into bigger pieces, yeah.
if the sacks are large and full of glass vessels.
Oh, I didn't get to there yet.
Oh, okay.
However, if it's a lot of glass, right? So then you can take them off. Nevertheless, you shouldn't put them on an animal because Sarba Yichaim. We are going to do one more law here. If you stick fruit to each other, they become one entity. That's forbidden. That's considered gathering. Therefore, that all the things fell on the ground, you can pick up each one, eat it, but you shouldn't put it in a basket and not into a box, just like you do on the weekdays. Because if you do this, maybe you will go and you will organize them, and you will essentially be gathering them. And similarly, you can't gather salt because that seems like the mitzvah of gathering. All right, we'll stop here. Any questions? So again, we're just going to do 10 minutes. Say we do 12 minutes, but yeah.
When I was like 4, I asked if I'm allowed to go on a clean Shabbos, and you said when you're old you're not, but now yeah.
Yeah, when you're 4, it's different. So yeah, these are interesting laws. This is the laws of Shavuos. Shavuos is considered completely forbidden, but the difference is when you're becoming more observant, then you can rely on loopholes for Shavuos, for these laws here, because Shabbos is as we mentioned yesterday, Shabbos is an ever lasting area of growth. You can always grow in Shabbos. So, it's always important to never overlook a little change in Shabbos that you do. Like, if you don't watch TV Friday night, or if you need to watch TV Friday night, and you turn on the TV and you leave it on the whole Shabbos, that's a good start. Because you just can't turn on the TV Friday night. So, that's a good start. Little things like that are always important, and it's always important to grow in Shabbos. We'll see the next couple of days. Okay.
Paul, when are you going to?
Mendel, we're learning now. Okay. So here's what we explained last week. I don't know if I have the AI thing. Do you have it? Do you have it?
When are you going
Okay. The AI mimer.
Tomorrow. The plane leaves Thursday morning,
All right. So you guys listen.
so we go to Phoenix.
All right. So here's what we were studying about.
In the morning. What time?
I think I gave that.
Here's something. Mendel, come on. After. Let's go. Here's something. Mendel. I want to learn. I want to finish the mimer, and then we have school. Okay. Here is what we were talking about in the mimer. So, as you'll see in Judaism, there's 2 things when you do something wrong, when you sin. Actually, you're not going to be their King David on Thursday. But King David is an excellent idea that there's 2 problems when you sin. One problem is the sin, but even bigger problem is the person that sinned. Right? Right? And we'll see, because Judaism is about a relationship with God. Mm-hmm. So you can have somebody who never sins, but they could sin, right? So that itself is a problem. So that is what we said is the difference between a tzaddik and 2 types of tzaddik. You have one tzaddik who's disgusted by evil, and one tzaddik is not disgusted by evil. Regular people, and we said evil is not talking about Osama bin Laden. Evil is talking about non-godly things. So we said That was the difference between when Mashiach comes. Evil will be totally decimated. There won't be any evil. Billah hamavis lenetzach. Evil will be swallowed up. But nowadays, in the times of King Solomon, evil was rejected. It wasn't hated. It wasn't repulsive. It was rejected. And we said that most people, and the Tanya says, that most people are, the Beinoni, the Russia, we're not repulsed by evil. We're only repulsed by, we're not repulsed by evil, we're repulsed by things we're repulsed by. Then we continued on, and we said that what is the internal cause of the being repulsed? So the reason why I mentioned King David is this is like totally related with King David's class. What is the evil that we're repulsed by? So we're talking about there's action. Action is one thing, self-control. And then there is internal relations. So what causes a tzaddik to be repulsed by evil? He's repulsed. And again, evil does not mean terrorists. It doesn't mean political figures. Evil means we all have a lot of evil in us. We all have attraction to non-godly things. That's the concept of Tanya. So what is it? The tzaddik loves God so much. God is so present. He loves God. And because he loves God, he's repulsed by anything else. A regular person, he loves himself. He also loves God a little bit. He loves God at certain times, certain places, certain contexts. And so we said this is the difference between we said this is the difference between King Solomon and Mashiach's coming. In the times of King Solomon, godly revelation in the world, which we equate to the love of God, was very, very strong. But it wasn't fully present. It wasn't a full love of God. There was still protection in the world. People were still saying, well, when King Solomon dies, we'll have to get back to the regular way of life. People in their homes, in their private, they were still making investments just in physical things, just in case the God thing doesn't work out. They love God, but they love God when things are good. When things are bad, we'll have to move on. In the times when Mashiach comes, the godly revelation will be complete. It will be like complete love of God. We will not have any investments that are not in godly things when Mashiach comes. Evil will be totally gone. The idea of evil will be totally repulsive. The reason why it will be totally repulsive is because God will be absolutely present forever. And that's why when Mashiach comes, there'll be no death. Yeah.
The idea of the evil inclination is still present in this discussion.
Yes.
So we would say that the love of God is overwhelming the evil inclination, or the good.
Correct.
The good.
Or for a tzaddik, he doesn't have in the Tanya it talks about there's some tzaddikim that they don't have an evil inclination anymore. It dies, or it transforms. So in Mashiach's time, there'll be no more evil inclination.
With some of the tzaddiks born with just one soul?
No, everyone has two souls, but they were born that their animal soul was totally subservient to their godly soul. It was a vessel. It was a reciprocal. Our animal soul has its own agenda, so our godly soul kind of makes sparks against it. Some righteous people, like Moses, his animal soul was a vessel for his. It was just there to manifest his godly soul in this world. And that's why in Judaism, you'll always hear Moses never died. It says Jacob never died. The Rebbe never died. People say that because since their animal soul was just a vessel, a manifestation of their godly soul, when their animal soul died, their godly soul remained.
But we use our animal soul in service of God.
Correct.
Instead of being in opposition to it.
So our job is to use it in service, but every time we use it in service, there's always sparks, because it has its own agenda. Really righteous people like Jacob.
Friction, sparks.
Yeah, Jacob, their animal soul in their body was 100% receptive of their godly soul. And therefore, they had no evil inclination. And therefore, when we die, our godly soul says, wow, that was a ride. We're going back. But when they died, because there was no friction, there was no rejection by the animal soul, their godly soul stays in the world. And that's the Jewish tradition. That's why you have many, many righteous people. It says Moses never died, even though he was buried. Jacob never died. you have many, many righteous people. The Torah says they never die. What it means is that their body died, but their body was just playing the part of being a physical manifestation of their godly soul.
So their soul now then reincarnated into
No, not
another
necessarily. The soul just stays in the world.
in the world.
Yeah, it just stays in the world. Our souls, when we die, our souls are like, boy, we're out of here. This was not, all fun and games. But tzaddikim, their soul doesn't leave because it never had friction. It never had friction. It only saw good. So that is what we're saying. When Mashiach, so actually, the Rebbe in the last discourse the Rebbe gave out, he actually said, you could be a really righteous person, and Mashiach came for you already. You already only see God in the world. But you still have to be bothered that not everyone sees it the way that you see. That's what the Rebbe said. A really righteous
You have
person,
to be bothered by.
even though he only sees good in the world, he only sees positivity, he only sees God, Moses was still bothered. Abe doesn't see it the proper
same
way.
way.
You don't see it the same way.
Right,
So
okay.
my job as a tzaddik, I'm not a tzaddik, but if I was a tzaddik, my job would be to try and teach people to see things the way I see, which, by the way, is a miraculous thing, which is another subject. But here what we're saying is when King Solomon was there, it was like, we don't not love God. We love God. We feel it on good days, at good times. When things are good, we say, wow, we love God, everything's good. The problem is bad days. So King Solomon was a long, good day. It was a good day. He was sovereign over the world. God was in the temple in Jerusalem. But as soon as he died, the good day was over. When Mashiach comes, it wasn't a good day. It was part and parcel. It's going to be part and parcel with the world that God is everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Solomon built the temple, right?
Correct.
So God was present in the temple
Yes.
continuously.
Correct.
So it was more than just Solomon.
Well, Solomon's era. Please stop that, Mishka. It was
Understood, but
Yeah, that's no. So actually, the first temple after Solomon died, there were some of the most terrible kings in Israel were after Solomon died with the first temple, Some of the worst kings, and Jews were doing idolatry. Ahab,
Yeah.
right? Menashe.
Right. So that temple, was God's presence lessened after Solomon had passed? Did God sort of also leave somewhat the presence of the temple?
I don't know if he left the presence of the temple, but when Solomon was there, he was able to be a really good king and implement the ideas of the temple in the world. Other kings, they probably didn't even visit the temple. They probably didn't visit it. Was God's presence less than the temple? Very likely, but I don't know for sure.
Or decreased
it's
somehow?
strange.
Well, I mean, you talk about a soul persisting, like Moses' soul persists. But I've heard of, tzaddik, that we need 24 tzaddiks on the earth, or everything would fall apart.
It's a long subject. There's many
There's
types of
more to it,
tzaddikim.
okay.
The most eminent tzaddikim, the greatest tzaddikim, which people always say the Rebbe is alive. Rabbi Schneerson, where do they get that from? The Rebbe spoke about his father-in-law. He's in the world. He's doing this. He's doing that now. I mean, the Rebbeim even would go to the graves and say, "Oh, I just spoke with the previous Rebbe." And not only that, but the Rebbe told people said, "Oh, I didn't have a child. Whatever. You gave me a blessing. I got healed." He said, it wasn't me. I just go to the ohel of the previous Rebbe, and I ask him to pray for you. That's what the Rebbe said. So that idea is essentially in our life now, our body is primary and our animal soul is primary, our godly soul is secondary. After we die, our godly soul gets to disconnect from our consciousness, our animal consciousness, and he realizes, no, I'm really primary. A tzaddik, when he's alive in this world, his godly soul is always primary, because the animal soul is never a hindrance.
It just seems
So
odd.
when he dies, his godly soul can stay in the world.
We're slaves in Egypt, and then we're liberated from Egypt by Moshe. And we come to the Jordan River, and Joshua leads the Jews into Israel. And then ultimately we have Solomon builds the temple. He is the wisest of all men. And ought to be the culmination of the story.
So that's what we're explaining why it's not. The reasons why it's not is the godly revelation in the times of King Solomon wasn't through and through. It wasn't through and through. It was very strong godly revelation, but it didn't transform all evil. It wasn't mios bara. It didn't get rid of the evil in totality. It got rid of it momentarily. It was so powerful that for the era, it got rid of it, but it didn't transform in totality. When Mashiach comes, evil will disappear in totality.
Okay, so entering the promised
So it's almost
land.
like in Solomon's time, King Solomon's time, everyone was ultra orthodox outside of the house. Inside their house, in their bedroom, in their private place, they still had an evil inclination.
One would think that in Solomon's time would be the moment when Mashiach would come, because that's as good as it gets.
No, it was good. Well, so that's what we're saying here. We're
Not
saying even though it was very, very good, it didn't internalize in totality. It didn't conquer everything in totality.
Yeah, but from there, we've gone way, way down.
So, I mean, I just want to mention,
Every-
good eras. Every time something good happened, we got the Torah, we went way down. We entered Israel, we went way down.
There's
Solomon
cycles,
came, we
yeah.
went way down. The temple was destroyed, that's the cycle.
How are we ever going to rise?
We must be improving in some respects.
So yeah, the key to these things is every time we go way down, we become deeper connected. So let's say in exile now, what was Solomon lacking? He was lacking people in their own private hearts. They didn't internally follow everything that God does in their own private heart. They were doing it because it was popular. It was in style. So what do we do? God sends us to exile for 2,000 years, where Judaism is not in style. And nowadays, when a Jewish person turns to Judaism, he has a quality over Solomon's time. He's doing it even though it's not in style. So we're actually rectifying what was wrong during Solomon right now in exile. And that's the Jewish belief. And when Mashiach comes, the struggle in exile that we have when it's not in style and we do it anyways, that struggle will finally complete the picture. Mashiach will say, yeah, the Jewish people, God is in every place. Even when the Jewish person does many sins, God is still there with him. So that's okay. So let's continue on, and we'll see the Rebbe finish off the mimer here. This is so Solomon's time was very good, but it wasn't It wasn't internal enough. It was too much from above. It was too much from Solomon's job. It wasn't the people doing their job. Believe it or not, in the last discourse the Rebbe said, he said everyone wants Mashiach because I want Mashiach. He said it has to be internal. It has to be the people who want Mashiach on their own. That's what it is. And that's very strong in the belief in Chabad, that the reason why Mashiach didn't come yet is because we need to really want it on our own. We need to make the transition on our own. We can't make the transition because someone else is doing it for us. The Rebbe was a very powerful person. If the Rebbe would say, you need to do this, you would do it in a second. That's the way it was. And therefore the Rebbe wouldn't say to do that. He wanted people to do it on their own.
What's the connection to King David?
You'll see, King David talks a lot about, everything. Everything's King David. King David was all about the internal struggle. So that's why. Okay. It's known, it says in the Tanya, every revelation when Mashiach comes is dependent on our work in exile. So based on our work in exile, that is what will bring Mashiach. Okay, so therefore, in Tanya it says, all the work, all the revelations of Mashiach comes are dependent on our work. That means that our work is similar. We have to act similar to the way it will be when Mashiach comes. We have to do that in ourselves. We have to redeem ourselves. Which means that when we hate evil in the world with total hatred, that will make God show his hatred to evil with total hatred. Hating of Esav, v'tachsa sinah. When we hate evil in totality, we hate non-godliness in totality.
You said Esau?
Yeah, then that will show God says, I hate Esav. Now the problem is God doesn't necessarily reveal his hatred for Esav. Esav represents the opposite of Jacob, opposite of holiness. So when we hatred in our life with totality, God will reveal His hatred of evil in totality in the world, which will take away death.
But it's not enough to know right from wrong.
Correct.
You have to hate the wrong.
You have to hate the wrong. Because if you don't know right from wrong, on the first of all, according to modern psychology, if you know right from wrong, you will fall into major mistakes. Because if you don't deal with your internal organs, your mind and your heart, eventually you'll falter.
Let's say you're a person, this will be a transparent hypothetical. A person knows right from wrong in a particular way with respect to his own behavior, and yet he keeps making the same mistake over and over again. What hope is there for such a person? So
this is what we'll see with King David, and this is actually Judaism. There's a concept called white knuckling. So Tanya talks about white knuckling a little bit. But basically, what's the problem with white knuckling? You can't hold it in always. White knuckling doesn't work. You have to transform yourself internally. And that's what the whole Tanya is about. In order to relate to God properly, you have to change your heart and change your mind. So when you sin, and this is talk about King David, when you sin, the sin isn't the problem. The sin is a symptom of the problem. The sin is a symptom. So it's like medicine nowadays. Modern medicine a lot of times treats the symptoms,
right,
but it doesn't change the problem. So what do you find? You find people take medicine, and there's a lot of research on this, but people take medicine, they fix the symptom, and what happens? Another symptom pops up. Another symptom pops up.
Not sure the cause.
Or they'll say possible side effects. And people don't realize always, a lot of times side effects are not a chemical side effect of the medicine. It's just the problem showing up in another place. So,
whack-a-mole.
Correct. So, and this is also quite, because if God gives a problem and He gives a symptom, the symptom recognizes the problem, you got to go to the problem. So, there's a lot of people in AA in Prescott. And AA is fascinating because addiction is something that everyone could relate to now. It is a very interesting thing. A lot of times they'll have a certain behavior, let's say OCD, let's say for example, bipolar, whatever it is, and then they'll take meds for it, and they'll get better. And then a couple years later, the problem will burst out stronger than ever. Then they go to AA, and AA is a spiritual problem. They'll start transforming themselves internally, and they'll realize the OCD wasn't really a sickness. It wasn't really a sickness. It was expression of them holding down this struggle they had inside of them, and they were just acting out because they refused to act out to do what they want, right? Whatever. They refused to act out in a direct way, so they acted out in a roundabout way. So now what they do is they go to AA, let's say, and the hardship is they have to come out of denial and take. So what I'm saying is like we know nowadays for many years Jewish people were able to just hold themselves down, but nowadays we're pretty weak, and it's not but there's an advantage in that. The advantage is we will fix things internally. We get to fix things internally nowadays. We don't just fix things. So here we're saying, actually, let's just read this line here. It's very interesting. The Rebbe says, we just said, who transforms themselves internally? Tzaddikim, right? So how can we bring Mashiach if we need to hate evil? We can't hate evil. Who are we to hate evil? So, Mikivan shedera Kadosh Baruch Hu tzaddikim shehein muatim, since God put only a few righteous people in the world, and people who hate evil in totality, not like King Solomon's time. That's also a tzaddik. People who hate in totality is even more few. You do a piskam. And even with regard to a Beinani. Now a Beinani is somebody who knows he's internally messed up, but he never lets himself think something wrong. He never acts on it. He has clarity that if he thinks about something, He needs to stop it. And a Beinoni never does anything wrong. Even that, Yedua Piskam, it's known the saying, Halvai Beinoni. I wish I could be a Beinoni. Netzach Yiyeh B'chol Yisrael. The idea of swallowing death forever will be by all Jews. So even though, how can we come to that level of hating evil? We can't even be a Beinoni. Now, a Beinoni, what he does is, he accepts that he can never fully he can never fully control his emotions or change his emotions. But what he can do is, he can work at it. He can be aware of it, and aware of when he's doing something selfish, and he can slowly, when the emotions come into thoughts, at that point he can work on it. So, again, a Beinoni, when someone would say this, when the Rebbe would say this chassid is a Beinoni is people were like, oh, there's only no one's a Beinoni. One Beinoni, maybe a couple Beinoni. That was like a special thing. So, how could we hate the evil? But it's understood, since that's the way to bring Mashiach. Listeners from every Jew can hate evil. This is what the Rebbe says. How? You can hate evil always, because you love evil. But at certain times you can. B'shas hatfila, when you're praying, or b'shas sekatara, when you're saying, when you're studying Torah, or b'shas shemakayim mitzvahs, or every Jew has a mitzvah. Now again, don't never ever. I said something yesterday, but it says Rabbi Yochanan, when he's died, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was dying. He says he's crying. His student said, "Why is he crying? Why are you crying?" He said, "I don't know if I'm going to heaven or to hell." He said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the most righteous rabbis, how could he? So the Rebbe explained. He said he never thought about if he's a good person or not, because the moment you think about if you're a good person or not, you go off the wrong path. He was always thinking, good person, bad person, I don't care. I can serve God, I can do a mitzvah, I can do something good, right? If I'm a good person or not, that's to think about before I die. If I'm a good person, bad person, I can think about my life, I can repent. But today, I got mitzvahs to do. I got things I could put tefillin on, I got things to do. So here also, the Rebbe says, when you hate evil, maybe while you're eating, it's very difficult to do. Or maybe while you're watching movies or whatever it is. But while you're praying, go full force. Or maybe every person has a mitzvah which is they feel is like their mitzvah, which they are careful about. While I'm doing that mitzvah, let me ride on and enjoy it. Let me do it fully. Or I feel once in a while, you got to meditate about it and think about how, even when you're doing mundane things, I'm giving it all to God. This is all God's. Because that's what it means to love God. It means you want to give everything to Him. And at that time, you will not be relating to your negativity. You'll only be relating to your positivity. When you, at those moments, give yourself over totally to God. That moment might be on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when you're dancing with the Torah and Simchas Torah. Don't think about if you're a good person or a bad person or what you're going to do tomorrow or what you did yesterday. Totally give yourself over to God in those moments. Now for you, it's temporary. But for God, that's who you really are. That's who you really are. You're really your godly soul. So when we take those moments and when we have absolute hismasrus, we say, I'm giving 100% to God in this moment, even though I know tomorrow I won't be able to. Now you're feeling it. You're feeling the energy. Give it to God, because for God, that's who you really are. When Mashiach comes, you're going to come out of the shell that's not like that, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's who I am. That's the real me. So a lot of times we fool ourselves, and we think that the real me is somebody who's faulty. The real me is someone who's righteous. I'm not the real me, right? In other words, you shouldn't fool yourself the other way. But inside of me, there's someone who's righteous. So when I'm feeling that I want to give 100% to God, let me ride on it. Let me ride on it for those moments, not because it'll change my life in totality, but because I'm now going to take a moment and experience who I really am, not in my imposter costume. And that's what the Rebbe is saying here. And this is actually the Rebbe's style. He says, even though we can't hate evil in totality like a tzaddik, like a righteous person, once in a while we can hate it. Once in a while we have a mitzvah. Ride it out, because in a little bit of time, Mashiach's going to come, and people are going to say, so nowadays people always say, hey, you want to put tefillin? Oh, it's not really me. And Mashiach comes, you're going to say the opposite. When I put on tefillin, that was really me. You know, there was a chassid who once went to the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe for the holidays. So he wear all this chassidic clothing. But he went and he said, what am I, a hypocrite? I'm fooling the Rebbe. I'm wearing all my, let me dress how I usually dress, like a farmer. You know, show him this is who I really am. Help me from where I really am. So he went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe Rashav said, oh, I always thought that you were a chassid, and the way you really are is when you're over here. And when you go home, that's when you put on the costume. Now I see when you're at home, that's how you really are, and here's where you put on the costume. So there are these moments of truths where you realize who you really are, and you realize it's tough to get there, and you realize that inside of you is perfection. So you have to go and act in that. You know, sometimes you might even say like, right now I feel this way, and therefore tomorrow, you know, I'm going to do something which reflects how I am now. Reflects how I am now, even though tomorrow I won't be reflecting the way I am now. So this is the key to, and now the Rebbe said when you do that a lot, then you slowly have an internal change when you act the way you really are. But this is a key to the Rebbe. So for years and years, Netanya, Hasidim, were always working on their emotions and trying to feel God a little bit more and trying to work on their mind and meditating a lot. The Rebbe a lot of time would say, no. You have to stop thinking that you are who you think you are. Your intuitive self is not really you. Your true self only wants to do mitzvahs, only loves God, only does those things. And it's counterintuitive, but that's who you really are. And when you unleash that a little bit, so, you know, a lot of times people, there's this rabbi in Crown Heights. He was a famous rabbi. Anyways, someone said, oh, you should go visit the Rebbe for Simchas Torah. Anyways, he went and he became a chassid. He became one of the big rabbis of Crown Heights. So I was watching a Farbrengen with him a couple years ago. So there were all these Jews who weren't chassidim. One of them said, what made you become a chassid? So he said, it's very simple. He said, I can't describe what it means to see a person who's really a true godly person. You're in that moment and you see this person is real. The godliness is real by this person. In front of the Rebbe, everyone, that's all that suddenly it reveals to you, wait, I do love God. I do. That is what I want. I want to live a life following the Rebbe. He said, I can't describe it. He said, but that's what it was. You would go and you would see someone who really meant it. And 100%, not even 99% like King Solomon. He meant it 100%. He said, I can't describe what it means. That's all you want for the rest of your life. The next day you wake up, you're back to your old ways. But slowly when you remember those experiences and when you tag onto those experiences and you say, you know, let's say tomorrow I'm going to put tefillin on for the Rebbe because at this moment right now I know it's the right thing. Tomorrow I'm going to forget. But at this moment, because I'm standing in someone who really, really has it, that was the experience that people had. So that was the Rebbe's style. He would say, don't focus on the negative. Focus on who you really are and remember who you really are. When you remember who you really are, you might be repulsed by who you're not. But that's part of transforming and allowing that self to come in, doing things 100% and allowing the 100% thing to come in. So we'll stop here and we'll finish next week. But that is how the Rebbe said it. So again, we just said that the way we bring Mashiach is by hating evil. How do we hate evil? You already hate evil. You just don't realize it. You just can't connect to it. But at certain times, it comes out. And when those times come out and you don't want to live any other way, you get inspired, then that's when you need to act and you need to know that's the true you.
Jews have conquered 3 kingdoms. there's a fourth kingdom that needs to go down before.
Mashiach comes.
Right. So is that kingdom the kingdom of Aesop, and is
Aesop is Rome.
Is Rome, and the thing about Aesop is he's an imitation. And so what you're saying is we embrace it in our worst way. We embrace an imitation of. We're an imitation.
Correct.
Instead of we don't recognize the real person. Just like Aesop himself was an imitation.
Correct.
He wanted his father's love, and he did certain things that.
Well, so our animal soul, we said in the Tanya, we have to recognize that we didn't create our animal soul. We didn't create the obstacle. We didn't create it. God did. God wants our godly soul, which has perfection, to overcome our animal soul. Now, we can only do that a certain amount in our lifetime, but that's our purpose, to do that, because it's very difficult to fight your animal soul. So the animal soul is like Esau, and the godly soul is like Jacob. And actually, the godly soul is like Jacob, and we have to conquer that. So it's like, Manas Friedman, the way he puts it, he says, humans are disgusting. We're essentially, literally disgusting. Human beings are disgusting. We are an animal soul. We're selfish. We're programmed to be disgusting. Our godly soul is selfless. So don't be surprised, right? It's like you're born one way, and that's your animal soul. Hopefully in life you'll discover you have a godly soul. You can't really relate to it, but once in a while on Yom Kippur you're wearing tefillin. So that's what the people in Tanya are trying to do. They're davening. They're saying let me have a conversation with my godly soul, and that will take me through the day, and hopefully we'll be able to transform our animal soul a little bit, and we'll be able to take those moments where we in fact are repulsed by evil, by bad things, in a certain situation, in a certain time, and teach our animal soul and say, hey, this is what we really care about, not what you care about.
It seems, I know we're going to finish, so I don't want to
Yeah.
start at 1 hour.